Hey there, horror fiends, how's it going? Okay, in this video, I just want to do kind of a quick run through of the films that were my stepping stones getting into horror, the horror genre as a kid. And I'm referring to like 1990, between 1990 and 1992, when I was in between like 3rd and 5th grade. And that's when around the time my parents started to let me rent horror films in the horror section, and but I had to, had the stepping stones, from the kid-friendly stuff to the slashers, and that's how this is going to go. And I'm going to negate the major franchises like Nightmare on Elm Street and the sequels, and Friday the 13th and its sequels, because we all saw those as kids. I want to hear more about the standalones, y'all standalones, so I'm going to share my standalone ones that I dug as a kid and rented over and over every weekend, as I was getting into a horror genre and then became more knowledgeable of it. Okay, the first one I want to throw out there, I'm not sure if it has a big fan base or not, but I love it. I think it's more of a nostalgia thing probably, but it's a fun little movie, and that is Saturday the 14th. This was one of my introductories into the horror genre, although this is not horror, but it has creatures and monsters and stuff, and it's a really cool little flick, especially for any kid getting into horror films for the first time. I think it's a good introductory tool into it. And yeah, that's Saturday the 14th, very fun Roger Corman flick. Okay, the next one I want to do is another badass, and it still is badass to this day. It's one of my favorites as well, and it's also a good introductory film for kids. It has some creepy moments in it, it has some demonic stuff, but it's all in the name of fun, After all, we're going to be talking about demons coming out of a hole in your backyard, and if you know what I'm talking about, that is The Gate. This film is a fun film, and you cannot deny that. It has some really cool special effects stuff going on, and tons of imagination. And yeah, I love this film with all my heart. I still do. I have the DVD in this one, but I'm showcasing the VHSs because that's the original artwork. But I rented this as a kid all the time. You couldn't pry this away from me. Okay, so moving on. The next kiddie horror film I got into, actually that my mom introduced me to by renting it for me, and I thank her all the time back then for it because I fell in love with this film. But it's also another good introductory tool into kids, getting into horror films, and that is Fred Decker's The Monster Squad. Okay, this is a fun movie. It has all the Universal monsters like Dracula, Frankenstein, the creature from the Black Lagoon, the Wolfman. The Wolfman has nards. And one film, along with a bunch of kids who are already horror savvy, and they have to try to hide an amulet away from Dracula before he takes over the world and ruins it. It's a fun little film. It has a big fan base, and it pretty much speaks to in the hearts to all like adult horror fans. I think a lot of y'all agree with me on that. Okay. So those were some of the more kid-friendly ones, and two more I'm going to show you are kid-friendly to a degree, but they're scary. They're very scary. And that is the next one. I actually rented this the first time, and then I always saw it on my old days of HBO back in the early 90s. It was always on, and that is Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Okay, I'm sure a lot of you agree with me out there, especially ones afraid of clowns, that this movie is creepy as hell. I mean, it's quirky and fun. It's not scary, but the clown makeup and the design of the clowns are scary as it is. And for a while, I couldn't eat cotton candy for a while after seeing this, if you catch my drift, if you know what I'm talking about. Okay, but Killer Clowns from Outer Space, love this film. Okay, so next, moving on, is another film that was kind of a good introductory to vampires for me, and it's still one of my very favorite vampire films. And I think the makeup effects is creepy in it, and the story is good. And like again, it introduced me to a lot more vampire films because back in 1991-92, I really started getting into vampires. Now, I'm not talking about none of this Twilight bullshit or sexy True Blood crap. I'm talking about good old school scary vampires that were vicious. And that movie is Tobe Hooper's Salem's Lot, okay, based on the Stephen King novel. This movie I rented all the time. The makeup effects, the contact lenses the vampires wear, everything is creepy about this damn movie. And No one can argue with me on that. I'm sorry, you'll lose this argument, but this movie is creepy as hell and still is to this day. And I think it's a good introductory for a kid, but it may scare them in some scenes, especially the ones involving the newly turned vampires coming to people's windows at night with their bright yellow eyes begging to come inside. Creepy stuff. But yeah, Salem's Lot. I rented this religiously when I was a kid. Okay. Now, I'm going to move into more of the slasher films, the standalone slasher films. Around that time that I really liked. Now, one of them is a franchise one, but and I know I mentioned earlier I was going to do franchises, but I meant like the well-known ones. But this one I'm going to kind of stand alone for now. Okay, and that is, okay, this is not going to be a shock because if you see around my room, you're going to guess which one this is. But this was a fun slasher film. Had a very cozy feeling to it, and I liked how it took place in suburbia. And also on campus a bit, and that film is The Slumber Party Massacre. No shock really if you think about it, but this is a good one in my book. Okay, I love this film. The driller killer's badass, the girls in this movie are badass, especially Valerie, the next door neighbor who saves the day, and it has some really cool scenes and some cool edits in it. I always recommend this movie. It's, yeah, a lot of people consider it a B flick, but it's a damn good B flick. Okay, now the next one is another franchise title, but its story is standalone, and that is Prom Night. Yes, I always rented this movie all the time when I was a kid, and it introduced me into the whole red herrings thing, how everyone's a suspect or could be a suspect, a killer with a disguise, and honestly, this has one of the best slasher chase scenes ever, and that is between the killer with his axe running after Wendy, the school bitch, in her red prom dress. Good stuff. This is a good movie. I like the twist at it, who the killer was and why, and all that stuff. But a lot of people give this movie shit because of the disco music in it. Get over it. It was a sign of the times back then. It's still a damn good Hitchcockian type slasher. Okay? Okay, so the last one that I always rented all the time is not a big fan favorite among slasher films, but I fucking love it because I am a whore for a good college campus slasher flick. Now, there's tons of them, like The House on Sorority Row, The Initiation, The Dorm That Dripped Blood, you know, all those. But I got into some of those later when I was like 13, 14 years old, in like 94 and whatnot. But this one I always rented when I was a kid, and I think it's a little bit suitable for children a bit. I don't recall there being too much nudity, but there's not too much gore either. But it's a fun body count film on a college campus, and that one is Final Exam. Yes, I rented this movie all the effing time. This and Slumber Party Massacre I would rent back to back all the time together because I was always allowed to rent two VHSs, and I always rented Slumber Party Massacre and Final Exam. But yes, the killer doesn't have a disguise, some cool mask disguise, and there's no motive. He's just a crazy loony on a campus, bent out to fucking kill whoever gets in his way, and I love it for that. It has a lot of the college hijink crap going on in it, the rush stuff. It has, you know, the constant rambling between characters and character development, but I love this movie. I don't know why, but man, when I first saw it, I fell in love with this film. It was my introduction into college campus slasher flicks, and I loved it for that because I love those films. Like I said, I am a whore for them. Anyhow, so those were my beginning films into horror that I always rented all the time back in the early 90s. And now I'm curious of what some of yours were. More so the standalone ones, not so much the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, because we all know about those. Everyone saw those when they were young. But more the standalone, unique ones. I want to hear about those. So comment below and tell me yours. If you have a list or just a couple, I'd like to hear about them. Okay? Well, take it easy.